guys, this is Caline from Property Name Brothers, and we're very excited to take you through this brand new series. And this series is for homeowners who are looking to upgrade from your current property. And in this very first episode, we're going to take a look at whether should you buy first or should you sell first in today's market. Let's go. So 11 to 15 years ago, the property market was very different. Back then, homeowners actually have the luxury of time to sort of go ahead and purchase their next home first while slowly taking their time to sell off their current place. Because back then, things like ABSD, LTV, as well as TDSR, MSR, all these policies were not yet heavily implemented. And because all these policies have now come in place, it has shaped the entire market very differently in today's market. And in fact, in today's market, most of the homeowners actually prefer to sell first to have that ease of mind. In today's market, it is more stressful. Let's say you're planning to buy first without selling a home, especially so if you need the funds to come out from your sale. Sometimes we do have clients coming to us when they have already bought their next home and they have yet to secure a buyer for their current place. So when they come to us, they are in a time crunch to sell. So that might cause some additional stress in terms of accepting offers that might not be within your benchmark yet, or even more stressful is sometimes perhaps the property or in that season of market, there is just not enough demand for your current property. In today's episode, what we want to take a look is understanding what we call the 3+3. First is in terms of your timeline, there are 3 very key milestones for you to take note of. And the second portion are what are the 3 key factors that you need to consider so that you can have a better informed decision whether or not you should go ahead and buy first or sell first in your particular scenario. Very quick look at what a typical HDB selling timeline will look like. So basically, the entire timeline, let's say it's a very standard one, it takes about 3.5 months to 4 months from the point of option all the way to completion. And of course, within this entire 4 months, what happens is, first of all, you receive your offer. In exchange, we will issue up the option to purchase the OTP, and then comes your exercise, your submission, and then your acceptance, endorsement, and then your completion. And a very quick fact, so for HDB timeline, the maximum allowed extension after the point of completions is only 3 months, and you're not legally allowed to take anything more than that according to the HDB rulings. For today's timeline, we're just going to look very specifically if, let's say, you are planning to upgrade from your HDB to a private property. So in terms of buying, this is what your typical private resale buying timeline will look like. And just to take note, for private homes and private contracts, all the terms and conditions can be negotiated between sellers and buyers. So in terms of like option period, completion period, deposit, so on and so forth, they can all be privately, mutually agreed by both parties. For the private timeline, let's say when you go on and buy, in exchange of a 1% option fee, you receive the OTP. Standard, we have about 2 or 3 weeks option period before you hit your exercise. And then after, very typically, we have an 8 to 12 weeks completion. And of course, completion is where the change of legal ownership starts. And that's usually when also you get the keys to the property and you can then move in. All in all, that also takes about 3.5 months to 4 months for the buying process. In planning your timeline, there are some key fundamentals that we need to understand first, and in terms of the milestone and how that's going to affect your transition. The very first key milestone in terms of the timeline planning will be your option period. So option period refers to the time where you place down the deposit for your next home, and in exchange you get the OTP. So similarly, if let's say today you're a seller, that's what the point that you issue out the option in exchange for your deposit. So this we are looking at for the HDB sale timeline. Second one, very importantly, is your exercise period. So during your exercise, basically that means that this is the point that the buyer agrees to follow through with the entire contract, and now we are all in the binded contract, and the exercise date is one very key thing to look out for, because that's going to determine whether there's going to be any ABSD, and in the eyes of IRAS, that's where your property ownership is counted from. So the third key milestone would be the completion period. And this is very important because your funds, all your sales proceeds are only going to be dispersed upon the completion of the sale. And usually, let's say for HDB completion, as a seller, you'll get down to a HDB hub, you'll collect your cashier's order. Once you bank in, maybe 2 to 3 days later, you can then utilize the cash funds in your bank. And for CPF refund, so do take note, CPF refund is only given back to your OA account approximately about 7 to 14 days after the completion. And let's say you do plan to use use this amount of CPF for your next property, then that also takes another 7 to 14 days to process the withdrawal back out to the next home as well. So when planning a sale and purchase, when you do need the funds from your sale to pop over to the buying side, the completion date is also very key because we need to know how much buffer time do we need in between these two timelines from your sale to purchase in order for your funds to safely cross over. Similarly, for the buying side, whether it's a private or a HDB, there is always 3 key milestones that we need to look out for. The first one is your option, the second one, your exercise date, and the third one, your completion date. So having a good understanding of where these 3 key milestones are, now we need to take a look at what are the 3 key factors that you need to look out for to help you make that better decision whether or not you should go ahead to sell first or buy first. Alright, so the very first key factor that we're going to take a look at is ABSD, also known as your additional buyer's stamp duty. So how does IRAS determine whether or not at this current point your property ownership belongs to 0, belongs to 1, 2 or 3, so on and so forth? It's not based on the completion date. So many people have this misconception that property count is based on completion date, but in the eyes of IRAS, it's based on the point of exercising the option. So let's say, when you're selling, if your buyer has already gone on to exercise the option for your place, technically your property count goes to 0. So similarly, let's say you've already sold, now you're going to buy, your property count goes back to 1 the moment you exercise the option. So that's how IRAS determines your property count. So because of that, let's say if you have not sold off your current place, so that means that currently you're still holding on to your HDB, your property count is at 1. And if you go ahead to purchase and exercise for your option for your private property, technically that gives another property count into your inventory, so now you are holding on to 2. So because of that, let's say you choose to buy first without selling off your current home, you will be hit with the 20% ABSD. Let's say if you're Singaporean, if you're a foreigner or PR, then the rates are different accordingly. So this is the very first key factor that you need to take note of if you do plan to buy first before selling. So just take a very quick look at the 3 key milestones and how we're going to apply this technique here. So let's say if you buy first, option, exercise, completion, the 3 key milestones, and then you choose to only start selling your property, or you only secure a buyer or rather an exercise option for your place after you have exercised the current home here, then definitely this will give you ABSD because of the exercise date over here. So on the other hand, if let's say you choose to sell first, then technically that's going to free you of the ABSD, because in this case, if let's say you manage to sell first, you have secured a buyer who's going to exercise the option safely, and only after the exercising, then only do you go ahead and place down that option as well as exercise the option for your next home. Then because of this gap over here, then there will be no ABSD in this sense. So these are basically the 2 key differences, whether or not you choose to sell first or whether you choose to buy first. There are scenarios where you can refund back the ABSD, but however, the ABSD has to be paid upfront in cash first, and upon completion, you must fulfill these following requirements. For the first one, you have to sell off your current home or rather your HDB within the 6 months of your purchase. And the home that you're buying under for your next home has to be a matrimonial home in order for you to claw back the ABSD paid. And the next home then has to be under both husband and wife name. So factor 2 is something that most people sometimes overlook. This one, it affects your entire loan amount because the LTV is affected. Let's say if you choose to buy first before selling and your current property still has an outstanding loan pegged to it. So what's going to happen if let's say you choose to buy first before selling? Because technically in the eyes of the bank, you want to have a second property loan. In this case, your LTV, instead of the standard 75%, right now is going to drop all the way down to 45% as your maximum loan amount, and you would then need to fork out a minimum of 25% in terms of cash down payment, and the remaining 30% you can use either CPF or cash. So that means that you're going to fork out more than half just on your down payment itself. So if you choose to buy first in this scenario, this is really one thing to take note of, and do ensure that all your numbers are also in place. And the third factor will be whether or not you need the funds to come out from the sale of your home, or are you very comfortable to use your own savings right now to go ahead and complete for the buying side first if let's say you choose to go ahead and buy the property first before selling. Just a quick guide. So depending on where you are on the timeline, if let's say you manage to get the full 75% loan, then the down payment needed will be about 25%. And let's say if you're hit by the second property loan LTV and you do need to come up with the 55% down payment, and let's say you have not sold your current place at that point, then technically you need to have all these funds ready for the completion to take place for your buying side first. To quickly sum up for you guys, we have taken a look at the 3 different factors, and these are the main differences if let's say you choose to buy first or sell first. ABSD, let's say if you buy first, have to take note, very likely you'll be hit with the 20% additional buyer stamp duty. And of course, to sell first, that release your property count, and that means that there will not be any ABSD imposed. Secondly, is in terms of your LTV, your loan to value. So let's say if you're not able to take up the full 75% loan due to your current existing loan still pegged to you, then you do have to ensure that you're well prepped for the down payment as well. Let's say you do sell first, you have already dispersed off the bank loan on your existing hand, then technically when you buy, that also means that your bank loan and your property count goes back to 1 only. And at that point, then you can fully maximize out the 75% loan. And let's say you choose to buy first, definitely you got to ensure that you have the cash and the CPF ready for the down payment even before the completion of the sale funds. And of course, normally if let's say you sell first, then that gives you a bit more flexibility because you can then utilize the sales proceeds from the sale to port over to your purchase. As a homeowner who's planning to upgrade, these are the 3 key factors that you have to look out for. And personally, if let's say you are someone who's a little bit more risk adverse, you want to make sure that all your funds are already out first and you do want to utilize the funds from your existing property, then perhaps the better route will be to sell first, because that also means that you can extract all the equity from the sales proceeds to port over to the next home. You do not need to worry whether you'll be hit with any ABSD. And of course, that's going to allow you to have more time to slowly take your time to market your home and find the right buyer, because let's say you go ahead and buy first. The good thing is that of course when you buy first, that you can then safely secure something that you really love even before disposing of your current place. And once we have done that as well, because we have gone ahead and buy first, and if we do not want to hit by the ABSD, sometimes in that scenario you might be in a time crunch to quickly dispose of your property. You might even have to come to a scenario where sometimes you have to accept an offer that perhaps is lower than your expectations or your ideal price, just because right now you are in this time crunch. So if let's say now if you decided, okay, definitely I want to be a bit more risk adverse, I want to sell first. But if let's say I sell first, then where am I going to stay, right? After I've sold off my property. In this case, let's say we are doing for a HDB to a private property. Sometimes we can do what we term as a back-to-back transaction, meaning to say that we go both transactions hand in hand and concurrently. So we'll do the selling together with the buying at the same time. And in fact, we can do multiple different kind of scenarios in terms of planning a concurrent timeline for you to do that one move. It can be like done through a bridging loan, it can be done through buying your next home with a longer option period. So the timelines here are very much flexible, and there are a lot of different moving parts to take account for. So this really comes down to your own personal choice, your personal preference, and your personal finances. So do have an in-depth consultation with your realtors to ensure that all this timeline planning is done properly as well before you kickstart any of the purchase or the selling side. Alright, so we've come to the end of today's episode. So this is really just some quick tips and quick factors for you guys to consider if you're planning to sell or buy first in today's market. And if you guys want to come by for a consultation with our team, feel free to contact us as well, and we'll see you guys on the next episode. Have to restart, right? HDB to your private home. That's it. Now I see you.